Hi, it's Kelly again. This is part two of my interview with Corey Kupfer. In the previous interview, we had talked about two of the five tenets that Corey recommends for building authentic relationships. We're picking up in the conversation where he's telling us more about those tenets, and he includes some other fascinating information that I'm sure you're going to enjoy listening to as well. Take it from here, folks. This podcast is sponsored by Bigger Brains, online training that won't bore you to tears. Expand the minds of your workforce at getbiggerbrains.com.
Welcome to Permission to Speak, the video blog and podcast that loiters at the intersection of leaders who want their people to speak up, technology that facilitates connections, and results that serve our higher purpose. Now, here's your host, Kelly Vandever.
Given us some great examples here, and I would like to go back to the five tenets because we did tease that a little bit. So you've mentioned a couple already. The caring and what was the caring and
the first one was give first.
Give
the
first.
Second is care and be interested.
Right.
And the third, you want me to go the other three?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that next. Okay.
So the third one is show gratitude and appreciation. The fourth one is mutual respect, and I've got a twist on that, so we can delve into it. And then the fifth one is trust. None of it is possible without trust.
Okay, so let's start with show gratitude next.
Okay. So first of all, I just believe that in life. I think so. Let's start there. I mean, if you're actually in the best way to get you out of it, like if you're in a funky mood or you're down or it's been a challenging time. The best way to get out of it is to get connected to gratitude. So there's an exercise that I've done for 90 days plus, at least 5 or 6 times in my life, where every night, or you can do it every morning. I tend to be an evening person before bed. Some people do it when they first wake up. You write down 5 things you're grateful for in your life, and you try not to repeat them. So it's easy to say my family, whatever. But if you actually try to make it 5 things you were specifically grateful for that day. So, as opposed to just being your family, being that, oh, my wife did X for me, or my employee, and it's amazing what happens to our mental state and our emotional state when we get connected to gratitude. And then when you apply it on teams, with employees or other people in your life, key industry partners, vendors, family, whoever it is, it's amazing because no matter how confident and comfortable in our skin all of us are, everybody wants to be appreciated. It's a fundamental human need and trait. Some people more than others, but there is nobody on this earth who, unless, I don't know, they're a psychopath or something, but basically almost, nobody on this earth who doesn't appreciate gratitude and appreciation. And it builds relationships.
So what are ways that you do it when you're doing that with folks that you work with?
Yeah, so, it was interesting. I think back, I was driving in a got, it was probably about a year or so ago, with one of my, so I mentioned I'm an entrepreneurs organization, which is a global organization of, we have, I think it's 12,000 members in 60 some odd countries, 130 chapters, 40 chapters. Any case, I was driving, so we have this thing called Forum where 7 or 8 of us get together every month in a confidential environment for half a day to support each other to be successful in business, family life, personal. And I was driving with one of my forum mates on the way to or from a meeting, and my assistant called, who was phenomenal, Dawn. She runs my life. She's great. She does everything. It's just become second nature to me. I told her how much I appreciate her at the beginning of the call. I thanked her for certain things she did and really being on top of things. I closed by saying, hey, thanks for all you do for me. And for me, it's not a tactic. It's genuine. I really do appreciate it. she's a superstar. Without her, my life would be totally different. The business would be totally different. And I remember my forum mate turned to me and said, boy, I need to be better at that. You're so good at that, and it takes so little. It takes so little. I mean, it really does. I mean, I just do it. I do it like I built it as a muscle. And by the way, I didn't always do this. I don't want to make it seem like, this is innate to me. It's a muscle. You build it. But, even if it's the cashier at the supermarket, I'll thank them, because here's the thing. First of all, it makes people's day brighter. It's amazing how easy it is to do. But also, it makes my life totally different. When I'm constantly in a state of gratitude, right? And I build that muscle during the good times. When things get challenging, I can call upon that, right? I mean, during the Great Recession, when I was crushed, I mean, I tell a story in the Authentic Negotiating book about our revenues were down 30, 40, 50 grand a month. I was $325,000 in debt, sleeping on an air mattress in my office because I'd given up my apartment. This is after 20-something years of successful business. I thought I was set, right? But, I'm a deal lawyer, and there were no deals going on. Companies weren't hiring people to speak and train like I also do. I had clients going out of business. I had clients who were in business who weren't paying me. I didn't cut staff as quickly as I probably should have. I mean, they're way more successful, smarter people than me that got crushed in 2008, 2009. And one of the things I did during that time is I went back to my gratitude practice. You know what? You're sleeping on an air mattress in the office. Grateful that you have an air mattress. Grateful that you have an office. Grateful that you have employees. Truth is, I wouldn't have been out on the street. I have family. Everybody has that, right? I'm grateful for that. Grateful to be how privileged am I to be in the position to be $325,000 in debt, right? I mean, that's a weird comment, but there are many people who would never be able to achieve that level of, it means I had a certain level of success before to even be able to have that credit, right? Now it was, don't get me wrong, it was tough times, and I tell a little story on how I used my authentic negotiating approach to work my way out of it, and how 4 or 5 years later the debt was 100% paid off. I had another couple $100,000 in my retirement account. I had, was back better than ever. But too many people tell that story only to get to the hero part, right? Only to get to this is how I handled it part. And the truth is that in the midst of it, one of the things that really made a difference to me was getting connected to what I was grateful for. And there was so much to be grateful for, even in the toughest times.
Nice. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with us. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Mutual respect is your next tenet for building authentic relationships.
So the easy thing on that would be to say, mutual respect. I need to respect you. You need to respect me in the relationship. Yeah, that's and yes, that's true. But the way I spin it is this, again, because a lot of what I work on is the internal work. So in a relationship, I need to respect you, but I also need to be able to respect myself. So it's not just me respecting you, you respecting me. It's about me respecting you and me respecting myself. And so you see too many people who are in relationships in business, places they hate working, intimate relationships, which is really unfortunate, where people, are in the kind of relationship where they don't respect themselves in it because of things their partner, has done or not done, and that kind of stuff. And that's the toughest thing. So what I say is, if you can't respect yourself in the relationship, there's something wrong. And it could be one of two things. Very often it is the other, you should just not be in that relationship. It's the abusive spouse, or it's the, horrible boss, or it's the whatever. Sometimes there's something for you to learn. There's always something for you to learn, but sometimes maybe it's more on your side in that, the other side, or that company's not doing anything, but because of wherever it is for you, past, experiences, etc. I mean, my wife talks about all. My wife's an entrepreneur as well, and she has a phenomenal culture in her. She has an entrepreneurial training company for socially conscious entrepreneurs, and she talks about workplace trauma. Like, people who come to work for her has worked at other places where they're really traumatized from being in just horrible environments where they were shut down, they couldn't express who they were treated poorly. So I think it's a big signal to be able to respect yourself in the relationship. So for me, one of the core tenets of building authentic relationships, business relationships, and others is that mutual respect. I respect you and I respect myself in the relationship.
Excellent. So if you're in an organization where you feel like you're having trouble respecting yourself, is it always the answer to get out, or is there a way to build your own self-respect?
Yes, I think there's three possibilities. One is either, and they could be not necessarily mutually exclusive, right? But one is to look inside first, right? Because it's easy to say, oh yeah, I don't respect myself because it's a horrible place, right? But especially if you're not, if everybody does not feel the same way, right? That may be a signal that it's not all on the other side, right? So I always think, even in situations where it's mostly, and we always have at least 5 cents in the dollar, right? There's always something for us to learn. So I always say go inside first, and it may be that we just have a lesson to learn, on our journey. Maybe. I see this with entrepreneurs a lot, in terms of owning their value. I talk about owning their value a lot, right? There may be nothing going on with the market, or if you want to keep it in an employment situation, let's say you feel like you're underpaid, right, in an organization, so you're unhappy. Well, that could be because you're underpaid and they're not treating you well, or it could be maybe you haven't stood up for yourself enough. You haven't asked, right? Other people have been more assertive in owning their value and showing their value and being able to present themselves in a corporate environment, because that's part of the deal there. So maybe there's something for you to learn on how to own your own value, how to ask for what you want, how to approach that, how to measure it. So it may be totally internal. Now, it may also be on the other side, in which case leaving's an option. But maybe, and I know in a lot of places this may not be possible, certainly in bigger places, but another option may be to try to shift the culture before you choose to leave, right? You have an opportunity potentially to make an impact. And you know what? If you're going to leave anyway, if it doesn't work, why not try it? I mean, I was in a partnership that started in 2010 that, I spent maybe a little too long, because I'm an optimistic guy, right? Where when things sort of capped out in the cultural changes that I was trying to make and in aligning it with, the way I want to work and the way I want people to be treated, I stayed and tried to really work through it and make it better. And at some point I decided it wasn't going to go where I needed to go, and I left. But I gave it a shot, and I think there are places where that might not work, but there are also places where if you do take that initiative, it's not that the leaders don't want it to happen. Maybe they don't know how to do it. Maybe they're too busy. Maybe they would love you to step up and do that. So listen, some places leaving is going to be the only option, but before you do that, I wouldn't assume that, if it's not internal, you need to leave. I would look at whether you can impact it.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Thank you. All right. And so the fifth tenet, trust.
Trust. Okay, so none of it, for me, trust is an underlying tenet of almost everything in life, right? So let's go through the other ones, right? Give first. Well, if you're going to give first, especially without any expectation of return, right, there's an element of trust in there, right? I believe that life is not linear, right? I think it's not quid pro quo, not just because that's tactical, but I don't think life is linear. We live in a paradigm where we're taught like things are very linear.
Right.
But the truth is that I do believe that if you generally, like there's a universal law of giving and receiving, I believe. I think it's an energetic law. I think it's a spiritual law. I may not believe that, but I do think I believe that. And you may give over here, and 4 years later, it may come back somewhere over there. Overall, if you are giving, it will show up. And if you're not keeping score, right, you're going to get a reputation of somebody who's a resource, who's good, who's giving, right? And somehow that's going to come back to you. It's going to come back to you multiple folds, especially if you don't have any expectation or time restriction or agenda. Okay, so but to do that, you need to really be in a place of trust, right? It's much easier to say, hey, if I refer you this client, will you do this for me, right? You can see that direct connection. With what I'm proposing, you need to trust it's going to show up somehow, somewhere, sometime, and be beneficial for you. So trust underlies that. Care and be interested. Well, I mean, first of all, hopefully you're just doing that because you're that kind of person, but there's a trust involved in that. There's a trust in that your time's not going to be wasted. There's a trust in that people are going to, care about you. You're not going to get rejected. That all that kind of stuff. I can go on and on. Show gratitude and appreciation. Well, why do that unless you trust it's going to, it's going to shift your mood and make a difference in your life. And mutual respect. Well, that's a big one, because if you're going to give respect and you're going to work to respect yourself, there's a risk of being hurt, right? There's a risk of you being wrong. There's a risk in my example earlier of, hey, why don't you take it on maybe before you leave and go, that you waste time or years, or you get rejected, or you lose out on opportunities. There's always a risk. So ultimately, trust has to underlie everything we do, building relationships, and otherwise.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right. Um, well, and speaking of trust, one thing I've heard you say is that if someone breaks trust with you, that you should give it to them again anyways.
Yeah, tough concept, right?
Right.
So here's I mean, our natural reaction as human beings, and I don't say your, I say our, right? Is somebody breaches your trust and you're like, that's it,
Right.
you're cut off. But think of it this way: what is trust worth if you're not willing to give it? Like when everything goes fine, it's easy to give trust, right? But the first time somebody breaks trust, they mess up, they whatever, you pull back and that's it. Well, then did you really give trust? Right? Did you really do it? And most people, like, there's a related thing that, oh, people have to earn my trust. Well, what if you gave trust from minute one? Do you risk getting hurt more? Do you risk it? Absolutely. Well, what kind of environment does that create? So what I say to people is, listen, trust is only tested when somebody breaks it. And we're all human. We all make bad decisions. We all make mistakes. I've seen people, example, I have clients who didn't pay me in the Great Recession, right? Or, at other times, occasionally. Overall, we're fortunate, far majority. We don't have big collection issues, but it comes up once in a while, right? Well, I could easily write them off. But you know what? Let's take the Great Recession. It's an easy time. People are going through their own stuff, right? They're trying to figure out how to make their mortgage and pay their bills. And yeah, should they have been open like I was and call people and be honest? Well, maybe some of them hiding out. They shouldn't be. It would be easy for me to judge them and never work with them again. But people are where they're at. And I don't make that as an excuse. I mean, I really believe in holding people to a higher standard. And I'll have a conversation with them about it and say, hey, you really can handle that differently. But we're all human. We all make mistakes. Things happen. So if you're going to cut somebody off the first time they breach your trust, then I don't think you're really, truly, giving them trust. Plus, and not tactically, but realistically, if somebody breached your trust and then you're willing to go back in there with them, I'm going to have an honest conversation, not sweep it under the rug, not overlook it, and then give you trust again. The odds of that person, right, being loyal to you, being connected to you, whether it's an employee, whether it's a key business partner, whatever, the level of relationship that can bring things to when you're willing to, come back into that relationship, it's amazing what can come out of that. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about somebody who breaches trust over and over and over again, who's not reliable, who's, all that kind of stuff. Those people you need to cut out. But we are so tempted as humans, and we often do it. The minute people breach a trust, that's it. They're gone. They're out. And, I think we should look at that.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. One other acronym you use is CPR. Would you mind telling us what that stands for and why that's important?
Sure. So two of the chapters in the Authentic Negotiating book are on CPR. One gives a very specific example of a major negotiation where I applied it with a client, and then the other one sort of tells you how to apply it in your life. Having said that, CPR can be used in so many other contexts. Let me start in what it means. I'll talk about it in negotiation, but then you'll see how it can play elsewhere. So this is one of the most powerful frameworks I know, and I've learned versions of this from my years of being a volunteer with the Hunger Project, and then I did some men's work. There were different versions of it, but I've sort of put it together in my own way and applied it to negotiation and some other stuff. So let's go in reverse order. The R stands for results, and that's the easiest one to understand. What are the specific measurable results you want out of that negotiation or anything else we're going to apply CPR to? That goes back to our conversation on clarity of objectives, what works, doesn't work, that kind of stuff. But a lot of people, if they do that, they stop there. They just get a list of results they want out of the negotiation. But what they don't do is the C and the P. So what are those? The P is purpose. And we talked about why in visioning a little earlier. What is your purpose for that negotiation? Okay, because there's a big difference. Let's talk about just using the selling the company or getting a raise situation. Selling the company, if you're selling the company because you want to move on to your new venture, or you're selling the company because you want to maximize value, or you're selling the company, one of the things you really care about is that your key employees are taken care of, maybe given jobs, guaranteed employment, whatever it is, or I can go on and on and on with examples. All of those things will dictate a different type of deal structure, negotiation, et cetera, because your objectives are different. If you're looking for a promotion or raise, in working for an employer. Well, why? What's the purpose of that, right? And it's easy to say, well, my purpose is to make more money. Well, okay. I use a technique. Honda is famous for this. Many years they use this 5 whys technique, where you always ask at least 5 whys. Okay, so why do you want to make more money? Well, I've got some kids who are going to college. I need to pay for college. Okay, why is that important to you? Well, maybe I never went to college, and it's really important that my kids have a better opportunity than me. Wow, why is that? You can keep going, right? But even at that level, you see the why of I want to make more money versus the why of I want my kids to have a better opportunity than I ever did because I didn't have the opportunity to go to college. We're at a totally different place, right? It resonates. I mean, for me, I get a little bit of a chill in my body, and certainly for the person who is getting down to their own why, it really gets, and that opens up a whole different thing. That changes the dynamic. So one of the examples I give, and I don't think I give this in the book, but I've talked about it in a couple of talks. So if your goal is to give your kids the opportunity, right? Let's say you work at a big company and they don't have budgets for a raise, right? It's easy. If your why is I want to make more money and they say I can't give you a raise, you're stuck. But if your why is that I want to be able to send my kids to college and you're able to share that in an appropriate way, well, who knows? Maybe they don't have budget in your department, but there's a scholarship fund that they have in their philanthropic arm of the corporation that they can give. Or maybe it's not within the company, but your boss or the CEO has a relationship with some funder or grant maker or somebody who can help fund that, for them, right? So now instead of saying, oh, I want to raise, I want to make more money, we don't have it in the budget, right? We're now working together because we know the true why of what you're trying to achieve, and you don't care that you don't get a raise as long as you have the funding to send your kid to school, right?
Nice.
So that's the key.
That's a good example. Yeah, great
C,
example. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, no. It applies to it applies to say in a business, resolving a conflict, you name it. It's so different when you get down to that true purpose for your own, clarity, and then also, by the way, it helps true you up during the negotiation, right? It helps keep that equilibrium because if you're clear on your purpose, so the CPR relates to my CDE, clarity, detachment, and equilibrium in negotiation. And then the C is context. So the question, so now you have your results, you have your why. By the way, a lot of people will do a draft results first, but then when they do their why, their purpose, you may revise the results to align, right? So if your result was, I want to get a raise of X dollars, maybe you change it to say, I want to get school funding, because that could be a raise, that could be a scholarship, that could be whatever. So now the context is the state of being, is what I call it. It is who do you need to be? What is the context you need to hold to achieve that purpose? All right. So there's a whole chapter in the book on a particularly very tough negotiation of a major team in a service business. I don't go into detail because I have attorney-client privilege. I got to make sure I don't, reveal anything. But it's in a service business. They in charge of like billions of dollars of business. So significant team. And they had gotten themselves into a bad deal. They had left one place. I wasn't representing them when they did this deal. They were in a situation where, listen, they had gotten big checks. They had gotten millions of dollars, but their clients weren't being well serviced. They had issues where they were. They really cared about their clients. Their business was dropping because of that. They were really unhappy with the other people. And they had tough legal agreements because they had sold their client base and they weren't supposed to solicit them. So they had a lot going against them. What they had going for them is that it was a business where client relationships really matter. And if they left, even if they couldn't technically solicit them, the clients might not stay. They might go anywhere else. So that was their leverage in the negotiation. But I took them through the CPR process. And the truth is, everybody has a context. It's like they talk about in companies with culture. There's always a culture. It's either by default or design. It's the same thing with context. You always have a context, whether it's stated or unstated. And their unstated context, well, actually it was stated because they said it to me. Their context was, these guys are jerks. We hate them, right? We need to get out of here as soon as possible. We're going to, it was all, that was their context, right? And considering that they had tough legal agreements, considering these guys were very sophisticated major players, what were the odds of, so what I talk about in the book is they got the results. We went through a whole process. The story's detailed. But where they got to in their purpose was their purpose, right? Because they were thinking of, we want to get out of here. Their purpose was to get their freedom back, right? For them, like when they came to that, that was it. I mean, they were like, yes, like that's in their bodies, right? That's at the level you got to get purpose. So what I said to them is, okay, let's talk about your context. The context is that, they're jerks, you hate them, they screwed you, blah, blah, blah. I said, what are the odds of you achieving your purpose of getting your freedom back with the context that you're holding? And they were like, yeah, not going to happen.
Right.
Okay. So now, what is the context we need to hold? Who do we need to be going into those negotiations? And in their case, for me, while purpose is often, you can do it the whatever way it works for you, but while purpose is often like a sentence or a phrase, it's got to be short. Because if both of these, purpose and context, because by drilling it down, you get to the essence, right? If like they had a paragraph around that, but when they got down to get our freedom back, that's it, right? So you want to drill it down to that. With context, you want to drill it down. Well, it could be a phrase as well, but often it'll be like a series of 3 or 4 words. And for them, they came to calm because they were not calm, but they realized they needed to be calm, right? There was no inherent deadline or reason they had to get out except for the fact that they were really unhappy and the clients weren't being served. But there wasn't any deadline per se. So they needed to be calm. They were all worked up. They knew that wouldn't serve them. They needed to be patient, right? Which is not what they were inclined to do. So it was calm, patient. The next one was tough for them, collaborative, right? I mean, listen, we had a whole litigation prepared. They could have gone to war. That was their alternative, or what William Ury would call BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. But they knew that that would be a mess, not only for them, but for their clients. And that if they came to a deal, not only would the deal, they need to be collaborative to get a deal, they will also need a collaborative relationship to move their client accounts over in a way that it didn't adversely affect their clients. And then they realized that that although those things were all true, these were tough negotiators on the other side. And there was something that they needed that was stronger, but they also didn't want it to go into that aggressive, reactive side. So they went through words like, aggressive, assertive, or strong, and they came up with firm. Because what firm meant to them was that it wasn't emotional, they weren't reactive, but yet they weren't going to be pushed over, So for them, what happens with the purpose and the results for people in the CPR process is that when you're in a negotiation, and I talk about staying detached and maintaining your equilibrium, well, the CPR tool helps a lot because you memorize the context and the purpose and you know your results. You also carry it with you in writing. So if you need to glance at it or step out, call a break, go to the restroom, take a phone call, you can read it. And what I always say to people is, and I role play with them, and it's amazing how real it becomes when they role play. I always say to them, okay, is the next thing you're going to say or do, this is what you have to do in the room. You feel an emotion coming up, you feel a reaction coming up, you say to yourself, is the next thing I'm going to say or do going to move me closer to my purpose or further away from it? It's the only test. If it's going to move you closer, okay, good. If it's going to move you further away from it, reevaluate what you're about to say or do. The same thing is you ask yourself the question of, am I holding my context? In their case, am I calm, firm, collaborative, and patient? If the answer is no, you're off. Take a few breaths, take a break, right? Reevaluate, call for lunch, end the session, let's say pick up tomorrow, whatever it is you need to do to get yourself reconnected. So that's the CPR process. And the last thing I'll say is, although I talk about it in the book as to negotiations, you could do a CPR for your relationship. You could do a CPR for your life. You could do a CPR for a project with your team on what you're trying to achieve. I mean, this framework could be used for almost anything, and I use it throughout my life.
Very good, very good. I could definitely see using in other contexts than just negotiating. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Okay. Very good, very good. All right, well, you have been very generous with your time, but I do have one more question before we wrap things up. And in this journey that you've been on related to authentic negotiating, what have been 1 or 2 pleasant surprises along the way?
Yeah, so, wow. So there's a few things. I think for me it is, so let me take a step back and say that it is not natural for me to be vulnerable and authentic. This has been a personal journey for me as well, right? Not that I'm particularly on the other extreme either, but I'm probably your typical guy who's who grew up whatever, driving to compete and succeed and show my best front and all that kind of stuff. And the concept that leadership is not just about vision and about enrolling people and being enthusiastic, or that one of the ways you can most effectively do that is to be vulnerable. So for me, I was pretty typical of somebody, in my 20s, early 30s, where I had something to prove and I didn't need help from anybody, and I was going to do it on my own. And then I started realizing that. And listen, I don't judge that. I think some of us need to, and it's not just men, although I think it, our society tends to, have maybe be more, a little more so. But I think we all want to, gain confidence in ourselves and say we can do it. And but then it comes to a point where I realized that, okay, maybe I can do it. But even first of all, there's a lot more you can do not alone, where you reach out for help, where you have a team. But second of all, even if I can do it on my own, why? It's so much easier. Why do I do it the hard way? What do I stop trying to prove it? So I came to that, a long time ago, and then so that's the first step in being vulnerable and authentic, right? The willingness to ask for help, the willingness to say to somebody, "Hey, I don't have it all handled," or "I need your help." So I think for me, that was one of the biggest realizations that it's been a while now. It's been years and years. But that's always unfolding at a deeper level. I think if you're going to grow a company or grow in your career or whatever it is, I think it's easy to get stuck when you don't keep looking at another level of the willingness to ask for help, to be willing to share and take input from people, whether it's on your team, whether it's mentors, whether it's just, people, to reach out to. So for me, I think that's the biggest realization. And the other realization about it is that most of the stuff that stands in the way of that is internal. People don't judge you negatively. In fact, they like you more and they want to help, and you give them an opportunity to give, I think one of our biggest weaknesses, humans, for most of us, is actually not our ability to give, although some people need to work on it. It's our ability to receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I know so many people are so generous. They give, they mentor people, they help people, they work on causes and charity, but you try to give to them, and it's impenetrable, impenetrable. You can't get in there. And sometimes it's a defense mechanism. I used to call it hiding out in the front of the room. I did that for many years. I naturally end up in leadership positions. And there was several years where I chose to step back and not take any front of the room leadership position because I realized that I was hiding out in leadership. You see, when you're in leadership, only so many people, most people won't challenge you. In fact, a lot of people look up to you. They want to be where you are. They think you're so accomplished. They look at the gap between you and them. But if you really want to learn and grow, you can't be hiding out, whether it's in the back of the room or the front of the room. So that willingness to open up, be vulnerable, and get help, and build team, and be vulnerable is that's what's happening.
Excellent. I hope people are taking hold of that, because that's great advice. Maybe reflecting a little on my own leadership experience there, but definitely. Well, Corey, thank you so much for your time and for being willing to share your wisdom with our listeners. So appreciated.
Kelly, it's been a super pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully I brought some value to your listeners.
This podcast was brought to you by Bigger Brains, online training that won't bore you to tears. Expand the minds of your workforce at getbiggerbrains.com. Thanks for tuning in to Permission to Speak. If you want to increase collaboration and innovation in your organization, check out more resources available at speakingpractically.com, or give me a call, Kelly Vandever, at 770-597-1108.